Welcome to Growing Golf, presented by Syngenta. Today I'm speaking to Gina Rizzi, President of the Radius Sports Group, which advises golf courses and organisations on sustainability. Following Syngenta's groundbreaking report on golf and social media, I asked Gina what the industry's response should be to growing criticism online of golf's impact on the environment. We spoke at the GCSAA Conference in Phoenix, and we began by talking about water usage, a hot topic in Arizona.
It's a critical topic. It's a natural resource we have a finite amount of. So it's really important to protect water. And actually, nobody knows that better than the golf industry. I know that golf uses a lot of water. It does, but it can be better, and it is better by doing things like using recycled water. And when you look at, actually, when I say it uses a lot of water, when you look at the ratio for a state, for example, like Arizona, it uses less than 2% of the water use in the state of Arizona. In comparison to agriculture and other industries, it's not as significant. So it's important to put that in perspective. With that said, there are things like, and a lot of the golf courses here in Arizona, they use recycled water. We work with courses in Texas. They use 40% of the golf courses. There's about 1,000 golf courses in Texas. 40% use recycled water. We work with Nevada. Nevada also, especially Southern Nevada, it's a really hot topic. And in one of the comments that you read, it was around an exception for golf. There is not an exception for golf. Golf is at the forefront of making reductions, and they've made a significant amount of reductions on water use. And one of the ways they do that is by converting part of the golf course back to native land and using native plants that require very little, if any, water. And they've done, I think, Southern Nevada has reduced their golf course turf grass by about 1,000 acres since 2000.
And that's not just reducing water then, that's actually enhancing biodiversity potentially as well.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And it's reducing the upkeep, and everything. Like, there's so many aspects of what the golf industry looks at to say, how can we be better and how can we continuously improve? But water is such a hot topic. And there are other things, the irrigation systems nowadays are very sophisticated and advanced, including the ability to program, the ability to identify leaks immediately, to turn sprinklers on and off with a remote control device, monitoring if there is any rain, stopping the irrigation system. And then there are simple things that golf course superintendents do around watering in off-peak hours. So like when it's cooler, when it's not going to evaporate. Most golf course superintendents do that practice, regardless of whether you're in a drought-ridden state or not. And then also hand watering. If there are certain dry spots, they'll go and hand water those areas instead of hitting it, across the board. So there is just so many great best management practices that are being used. And I would say that a golf course superintendent could consult a homeowner on better management practices of water use any day and help with water reduction overall, because the homeowners use a ton of water in any state, like in Southern Nevada. There's been studies done around that too.
So that's an interesting point. That's almost the superintendent as expert, and yet the perception of, quote, outsiders would be that perhaps people on the inside of golf are destroying the landscape, they're overusing water, they're selfish, greedy people. Right. Not just the business is bad, but the people are bad as well. Yeah. And yet the superintendent potentially has a role there.
They do, yeah. Yep, they really do. They are experts in their field, and more and more, they're going and getting continuous education around sustainable natural resource use. They do. This conference we're at this week, there's all kinds of education on sustainability and a whole showcase on sustainability and BMPs. So it's at the forefront of their minds, and it's really important. It's important that it is. So,
coming back to social media, kind of what is the threat level, would you say? Because it's a risk to business, a threat to business. If there's misinformation there which isn't addressed, it becomes an issue for golf course businesses.
Yeah, with social media, things can take fire, right? They can really take off just with hitting a nerve on something, and that is a threat. It's really important to be able to safeguard against that by sharing the stories and the BMPs and the best practices that are being used and the things that are being done, for example, with water conservation. So it definitely is a real threat when there's a lot of kind of naysayers or people that are uneducated and not taking the time to understand the whole picture.
We're very conscious in Europe around river pollution. Is that an issue that is high on the agenda in the United States?
Yes, it is. And that kind of touches on other areas, like we've talked about the Southwest and the West, but you get up into the Northeast and states like Connecticut, New York. There are a lot of water bodies in Wisconsin. There's a lot of care that goes into and regulations that go into protecting rivers. And I'm a fly fisherman myself, so it's important to me to protect rivers. And our industry has done a lot around advocacy work and going in, understanding those regulations, making sure that our best management practices specifically around those areas address the right things for water quality.
Let's talk about land, the second topic that kind of was highlighted in Syngenta's survey. Again, another quote from X: "Build housing on municipal public golf courses. They have absolute no place in a city, and the land should be of true public use." Again, is that the perception? It seemed to be a common theme that people saw golf as almost privatized land for the lucky few or for the happy few.
Yeah, and I think this kind of dates back to just kind of golf's perception overall, and looking at it as a elite sport. And it really has changed and continues to transform to be more accessible. And municipal courses in particular are our most accessible courses, which many of them have such wonderful programs, especially for youth in the community and diverse populations in the community, underrepresented populations. A great example of a golf course that is such a critical asset for its community is Lyons Municipal Golf Course in Austin, Texas. If you go to Austin, Texas, it has grown so much. It is so built up. There's tons of buildings everywhere. There's like 2 areas of green space in the whole city. One is Lyons Muni, and then the other one is a park. And if you got rid of that green space, you take away from the ability for all of these children who don't have access to green space to be able to go, be outdoors, be in touch with nature, get physical exercise, get to interact with one another, learn the great kind of skills around character building that come with learning golf. And not to mention the benefits of the wildlife habitat, and kind of there's a whole slew of benefits around nature of a golf course in an urban area. So the idea of kind of bulldozing down a golf course and making it into housing is just such a bad idea.
It's a very odd thing as well, because on the one hand, you've got these comments that saying, turn them into public parks, rewild them for the benefit of biodiversity. But in the same breath, people say build on them. Another kind of literally hot topic is urban heat. So tell me about that.
Yeah, you just reminded me on the duality of the views of that. There's that song, Pave Paradise and put up a parking lot, right? So get rid of the green space and put up more buildings, parking lot structures. And that is what contributes to the urban heat island. So the urban heat island is what happens when you have a bunch of impervious surfaces. So roadways, buildings, office structures. When you're talking about an urban area, like in Austin or like in LA, a Denver downtown, a New York, any place that has significant kind of roadways and concrete structure that doesn't allow the ability to have a cooling effect that grass does, your heat actually feels hotter in that urban area than it would, say, 20 miles out outside of a city. The downside of that is it contributes to pollution with the heat. It also contributes to less well-being, poor health that comes with pollution, and it also comes with...
Well, we're seeing deaths, aren't we, from, kind of extreme heat incidents?
Yes, the extreme heat. And then also it causes people to crank up their air conditioning if they have air conditioning. And then that increases the electricity burden for the city and increases cost eventually. A lot of cities still may not have electricity in some buildings either. And especially if you think about like affordable housing areas, they may not have heat. Then what happens is you're actually having like an ultra negative effect by taking out the cool grass within a city that comes with a golf course, 100, 150 acres. That would help to be able to bring that overall temperature down. So it's not good for the people that live there. And then there's the aspect of mental health. I mean, we have a lot going on in our world today around improving mental health and like what can we do better for folks in reducing stress and anxiety, and being in touch with nature and being around nature at a municipal golf course is one way of doing that. And a lot of golf courses nowadays, especially municipal courses, they're kind of becoming a multi-use facility where...
Well, I wanted to ask about that, because surely that is an opportunity, because golf in itself may not be enough. That may not be the attraction for everyone because of the existing perceptions. But, coming back to nature or kind of well-being within nature, and I think the research says that 2 hours in nature a week, is going to reduce stress. So what about the opportunity to have trails, either walking trails or biking trails? Can golfers get along with non-golfers, and we can open up golf courses to more use?
Yes, absolutely. And there are golf courses out there that are doing that. There's a course that we worked with in Utah that has a biking trail adjacent to it. There is a course in Texas that we work with that has a walking trail through it. There are a lot of, and especially municipal golf courses that at nighttime when golfers aren't playing or early morning hours, they open it up for folks to walk through and they often walk their dogs, through the course. Other things that courses are doing are looking at, movie nights at the golf course. They do a lot of things around STEM learning with children, learning about science and math and everything that you can learn about wildlife on a golf course. So there are things that courses are exploring to provide more of a community asset for cities. And that does make it a stronger case for why it should stay, why a golf course should stay in a city and not be bulldozed over.
So from a diversification point of view, I mean, it's good from a societal and community aspect, but it also makes good business sense, does it not?
It does, because really that economic impact that's created by the jobs from golf courses is huge. Also, charitable giving is very high within the golf industry. So there are a lot of organizations that will hold golf tournaments and events at golf courses that help benefit charities or people in need or causes in need. And if you just had a park area, that's not happening. So you get that economic impact. Golf courses, of course, pay taxes too in general. And there's just a lot of economic impact that can happen when you have something that's being utilized to provide a service of recreation and competition and tournaments. That's a whole other thing, is like when you start talking about tournaments coming into town, like in San Francisco, Harding Park, it's a TPC course. It's also a city course owned by the city of San Francisco. They hold major tournament events at Harding Park. So whether it was a couple of years back, PGA Championship was there, LPGA events. So they draw a lot of tourism and spending for and hotels and all of that goes into people wanting to come and attend a tournament.
And I know that's the case in Phoenix as well. It's a tourist destination, as we know. Golfers typically spend 20% more than the average tourist. So, there is that economic upside. Before we talk about nature, I suppose one other aspect of land which fits into the kind of the natural process is perhaps water capture, because at the other end of extreme weather events, we're seeing severe flooding on a major basis. And we know that where there's lots of concrete, you're creating that funnel. So golf courses have a role to play there in terms of mopping up extreme wet.
They do, yeah. So when it rains heavily in an area, so Houston's a great example. Houston can get severe flooding, and when that happens, it's like nearly impossible to get around the city because there's literally water everywhere. Well, our golf courses in Houston provide an asset by being able to absorb that water and filter it, because when there's flooding and all this rush of water goes down the highways, it's picking up trash and pollutants and all kinds of stuff as it churns. So when it needs a place to go, if it can find a golf course where it can soak into the earth, into the turf grass, that helps filter some of that sediment out, and then the water can keep flowing and it becomes cleaner.
So talking about natural processes, talking about nature and people spending time in nature as well. Interestingly, on X again, there was a campaign which was hashtag birds, not birdies. So this is something, again, that came up in the Syngenta research, and we also heard earlier that call for rewilding municipal courses, and this perspective that superintendents were almost anti-nature. And clearly that's not true. But why don't we hear more about nature on golf courses?
Well, we need to do a better job of sharing the story about nature on golf courses. But they're a habitat for wildlife and birds especially. You've got golf courses in Utah. There's not a ton of water bodies in the state of Utah, but what golf courses provide for some of the migratory birds that are flying over, a place to stop where there is a water body. They have a home. You've got in Hawaii on the Big Island, there are homes for the nene bird, which is an endangered species. And golf courses are like super passionate about protecting the nenes. And when they have they hatch, they are very protective about sanctioning off an area, putting up signage, making sure they're not disturbed. So they're actually protecting wildlife. You've got some golf courses where they do bird counts every year, and they'll actually see, what kind of species do we have showing up that maybe hasn't been around, like in a city area that hasn't been around the city in a long time. Guess where they show up? They show up at a golf course and they get counted. And so they're actually a wonderful habitat for wildlife, and not just birds, but all kinds of wildlife.
And also things, I think you were talking about Lyons Municipal earlier, in Austin, Texas, oak trees there, protected oak trees.
Yeah, they have heritage oak trees there that are very old, and they're beautiful, huge, beautiful oak trees that if this golf course wasn't there and it turned into a development, and there is an ongoing kind of dispute around developing Lyons Municipal Golf Course and a whole campaign around Save Muni. Those oak trees, they're beautiful. I've seen them. They're amazing. And if Lyons Muni wasn't there, they'd be bulldozed down and they'd be a big commercial structure or a big housing development.
So this comes down to then, there's this perception formed on social media, but it creates a perception, it creates a negative reputation for golf. How do we go about combating that? How do we get on the front foot and change the perception of golf? And this is the work that you're involved in. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So education and communication. It takes education internally and externally. So helping our golf course superintendents, who are environmental stewards, who are maintaining our golf courses, agronomists. They've gone to university to study this. They know what they're doing. So educating them on how to talk about and share the best management practices that they're doing. Also working with not only the individual golf courses, but we have worked with states. We've worked with about 16 different states regarding whether it's a state best management practices manual or guide, or on education, providing it at seminars and workshops, or providing educational videos, but really kind of educating internally so that a superintendent, they're not a public speaker, but they kind of need to put that hat on a little bit. And so we need to help them understand how to talk about what they do.
And there are ways of doing that though, aren't there? You can still present a superintendent either on social media or through written communications. It doesn't mean having to kind of enter the fray per se or get up on a pedestal and speak.
Right. No, it doesn't. And it really just kind of takes understanding the connection between what they do every day, that they kind of know that they know they're doing the right thing, but then understanding what is that perception out there. And when they have a moment to talk about it in a public setting, whether it's just with friends even, just be able to articulate and talk about it a little more. And they are doing it. They're getting much better at it. So that's the internal piece. And then externally, we need to do, and part of that's external when they have conversations with people or present maybe to their members or to a city. But the other thing is externally putting the literature and education out there. And the whole initiative around best management practices, all 50 states establishing them by 2020 here in the US was significant. And to my knowledge, I don't know of another sport that has taken that kind of proactive effort around all of these aspects of their practices and really focused on how can we be more sustainable. That effort was really critical, and that created a tangible guide that can be read, can be shared with members and communities. And then all of the facilities kind of have taken it to the next step of, how can we take what we've done within our states and make it customized to our facility? And then how can they communicate that out to their members or to organizations that they're interacting with or regulatory bodies that they're meeting with, but basically get the word out of the things that they're doing. And then there's more, that can be done around really kind of educating with, say, STEM events and putting the word out there, whether it's a press release or whether it's social media, but talking about key points or a bird count, like I mentioned, if a course does that, like sharing those results and not just kind of, oh, that's our results and putting it into a file.
But that's the key point as well, isn't it? It's actually the demonstration. It's, in some ways anyone can communicate. They may not communicate well, but anyone can say something, but it's actually the doing that actually matters. It's the demonstration, demonstrable results are the thing that's important.
Yes. And there are courses too, like some experiential, I think, interaction is great. So for example, one of the courses on the Big Island in Hawaii, a resort course, Mauna Kea golf course, they will bring in people who are staying at the resort, or it could be community, and they can do a tour they have beehives. I think they're up to like 4 or 6 flow hives on property now. And they'll take people on a tour, tell them about how it works, talk about how they're protecting pollinators, and the bigger picture around pollinators are that supports the agriculture for any state. And so some of those things that need to be pollinated in the state of Hawaii, they're helping that. So they communicate that as people are going through the tour. And then their chefs will create something special at the end of the tour that would be, bites or cocktails that includes the honey that was generated from the hive. So when you bring people through an experiential kind of communication effort where they get to live it and see it, it resonates more. And that's just one example, but there are courses that are doing bird watching tours or tree tours, like pointing out trees on a golf course. So the more that our golf courses and our superintendents and our general managers can do those kinds of things that help get the message out, the better.
And it needs to invite the community in as well, doesn't it? There's this, coming back to the report, this insiders, outsiders. Golf is incredibly good at talking it to itself. But getting out into the community, inviting people in, to let them experience it, as exactly as you said. Experience is a really important thing alongside that education.
Yeah, it really is. And I love the STEM events. You know, the GCSAA does the First Green events, which are basically STEM functions, science, technology, engineering, and math events for children at golf courses. And they have a whole curriculum developed. And then a lot of golf course superintendents on their own, if it's not through First Green, they'll set something up with the local school, and they'll have kids come do a field trip and then teach them STEM related things through activities. So those are great, of course, for the children. What I also love about that, though, is those kids go back and they tell their parents, or there's this whole communication lead up to the event where the parents are engaged to understand what the child is doing. And I think it's really important to emphasize the importance of conveying the message to not just the kids, but the parents and the school and the teachers, and that message extends into the future. It's not just a one and done, but an ongoing relationship. Because the more that we're doing that all over the place, the more that people will really absorb, you know, the real benefits and the things that are happening that are really good at golf courses. And then that will help combat that social media negativity.
Clearly, this is you're involved in this from an industry perspective, from a business perspective, but where did your love, and you mentioned earlier that you're fly fisherman, where did your love of the environment and the great outdoors come from?
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, which is surrounded by water and with the Great Lakes. And just really, I grew up in the country, so played outside as a kid all the time. My dad had a garden and he composted. And so I've learned about that, and I've learned about the circle of life with like the animals back there, the snakes and the mice, and like everything that you can kind of see what happens in nature by living in it, and just really kind of just love it.
In what you're saying as well, just coming back to that story about how you gained your interest in the natural world. With the compost, seeing life evolve from the compost as a child. Maybe that is the solution as well in some ways, to get more school children to come and see, to visit and experience golf, so that the perception that they might have in 10 years' time when they've got or less than that, when they've got a smartphone in their hands, won't be what they're perhaps already finding. They will have already experienced golf.
I think it's really critical. And I think it can make a really big impact to have more interaction like that with children. So not just thinking about a golf course in terms of a kid taking lessons and going and playing golf, but thinking about how can we interact with our communities more. And I know, like in the case of Mauna Kea on the Big Island, you know, they have programs for kids for career paths and learning around not just the golf area, but the food and beverage area and stuff as well. So you've got kind of that, you know, you've got recreation, play, health, you've got career development or learning or trade learning. And then you've got understanding STEM and the natural benefits and the community benefits for the ecosystem that golf provides. So it would be impactful if more golf courses did that kind of outreach and that kind of engagement with children. I definitely think that would make an impact.
And also you mentioned in that example, signage around the golf course, because frankly, a lot of us live in towns and cities. We might not be terribly, kind of knowledgeable about nature. So actually educating ourselves as golfers to be proud of the environment that we've got and be able to communicate that in the same way we might actually communicate, I hit a great shot today, yes. But I saw this bird, or yes. and I enjoyed the environment.
Yes, like the signage about pollinator habitats is wonderful, because a lot of people don't realize what type of plants can promote pollinators that a bee or a butterfly might be attracted to. So there are things superintendents do, types of plants that help attract based on color, based on scent, that help attract pollinators. So having signage around those pollinator gardens is great. Having signage around when a club uses recycled water. A lot of times that's required by states to put up recycled water usage signage. But what the other benefit of that is helping people understand that a course is not just aimlessly using any water. They're using recycled and reclaimed treated water. There's also, I've seen signage, around some of the courses that get a certification, an Audubon certification, which means they've gone through tons of steps, to get certified and ensure that they are implementing their best management practices. That kind of awareness building signage is helpful. And then you've got stuff like Lions Muni. That's on the National Historic Register for protecting civil rights. There's a lot of history with that golf course. So that's a whole different other kind of signage. But there are plenty of things that we can be doing in terms of educating on site at a golf course as well.
For any golf courses that are watching or listening to this that might have heard what you've been saying but think, gosh, we are some way off. We are not in a good position. We're not, we've got a golf course, we know we're looking after it, but we haven't really taken any steps to either document it or demonstrate it or communicate it. What would be your advice? What are the simple first steps a golf course can take so that they don't fall victim to what we started talking about, which was this perception on social media?
Well, I'm a big advocate of the BMPs, the best management practices. So those cover usually 12 to 13 different maintenance practices in a golf course, everything from water use and water conservation and water quality to pollinator habitat, wildlife habitat, to everything around maintenance or cultural practices, to planning around construction and design, which incorporates looking at what endangered species might live in the area and how do we protect that. So I'm a big proponent of these best management practices, and what a facility could do is ensure that they have one that is customized to their facility. That is a great first step because they need to kind of self-assess and understand what do we have and what are we doing in the first place, and set goals if they're not doing everything that they could be. And not every course has a huge budget to be able to afford a sophisticated irrigation system, but there are BMPs that can be done at a minimum to ensure that a golf course, in the case of water, is trying to be as sustainable as possible without having to spend a ton of money on irrigation system, like the hand watering, like the time of day that they're watering, like having an on-site weather station. There are plenty of things that can be done. So first, analyzing and assessing what you have, putting it into writing what you're doing, educating internally as to what you're doing and why, and then what the benefits are, and connecting those dots, because our courses need to understand the benefits. Like if they're doing all these great things, or if they're doing something that's not so great, how do they improve and how do they get better? And in order to communicate that out. So I would say the first step is ensuring that you understand what you have and having a best management practice guide for a facility in place. Natural first step. And then I think there are great kind of simple steps that can be done in terms of having member education or community education workshops, having those STEM children's events. That takes a little more planning, but it's not as hard as you think. And there are people that are available to help and assist, whether it's through the GCSAA or whether it's through individual organizations that are out there doing that kind of thing. And then I would say, interacting, educating golfers, not just at their facility, but working with the state golf associations, which are organizations that communicate with golfers on a regular basis all around the state, providing articles to them and content to them to be able to educate around what the BMPs are and what's being done at courses. So, and I know there are some states that do that on behalf of the golf course maintenance profession, like the state of Colorado. I know that they interact with the state golf association and make sure that they're communicating the BMPs. So that's helping the facilities. So if a facility reaches out to any of those organizations and shares what they're doing and then says, how can we get the word out through your help? That will be a great first or second step. And then there are plenty of more sophisticated and bigger broader, more planning, things that can be done. A corporate social responsibility report, is a very thorough document that can be created and communicated out that looks at sustainability of the entire club, not just the golf maintenance profession too. So there's lots of things that can be done, but I would say the BMPs would be the first step. If a facility hasn't done that, they really should.
And I guess if golf courses all take action, they all go along on this journey and they demonstrate what they're doing, perhaps we might see a change in the perception of golf on social media as well.
I think we will. I think we just need to, all of these things that we've talked about getting kids more involved, being more proactive in the community, educating internally, educating and communicating externally. I think you would see more of a shift in a wave where people have a better understanding and knowledge of the benefits, the ecosystem and the natural capital benefits that a golf course provides. And right now, all those people who are shooting out comments, negative comments, I think in some cases, and sometimes people can just be a little nasty, but I think in some cases it's a case of ignorance. I think they just don't know. And so the more that it's being communicated, the more we'll turn that tide.
Gina, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you for speaking to Growing Golf.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to Gina Rizzi of the Radius Sports Group. To download a copy of Syngenta's groundbreaking report on golf, social media and sustainability, go to syngentagolf.com. Please also tell us your thoughts. You can comment, ask a question, or rate this episode. Until next time, goodbye.